I'm Ed Adams, and you're listening to the AFCA Podcast. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the AFCA Podcast. And on this episode, we talk to photographer and cultural curator Nisan Harriman. I'll give you the details after the break. The AFCA Podcast is sponsored by Morgan Stanley Global Sports and Entertainment. May 25th, 2020 is a painful memory in Black history. It is the day when we saw Officer Derek Chauvin kneel on the neck of George Floyd as he pleaded for his life for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which fell on deaf ears and resulted in his untimely death. Now, as more stories of living while Black surfaced across the U.S., people took to the streets in protest, and this chant was said in unison around the world.
Matter! Black lives 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 matter!
Now, one of the people who captured this movement was UK photographer Nisan Harriman. Harriman took to the streets and shared amazing images of frustration, anger, unity, and hope that went viral. Now, Misan is no stranger to this. He has an eye for narrative and has been taking compelling historic photos, celebrity portraits, and magazine editorial for some time now. He's shot such notables as Tom Cruise, Giorgio Armani, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Cate Blanchett, and Olivia Colman. His photos have been featured in pages of Vanity Fair, British GQ, Harper's Bazaar, and People's Magazine, to name a few. And he made history as the first Black man to ever shoot the Vogue UK September issue in 2020. I recently had a chance to speak with Misan via Zoom to discuss his unique perspective, his body of work, and his affinity to culture. So, Misan, welcome to the AFCA Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
So, I didn't exactly know how I wanted to have this conversation. So I'm just going to just jump into some of the things that I was thinking about as I was doing my research and just becoming more and more of a fan of your work. But something that I thought about originally was going back, right? And you worked in finance and before you started your company, and then even before you even picked up your camera. And I was just kind of curious, like, what prompted you to do both? Like, you know, leave corporate America, corporate environment, and then start your own company, and then to, after all this time, pick up a camera to do what you love doing.
I think it's you know, I always say, look to your inner child, and you will find the answers to most of the things, good and bad, that manifest themselves in one's life. And I you know, was one of those kids that was a little bit scared of the world. It was too big for me, you know. I was, you know, I went to boarding school at a very young age, and, you know, for a young child, that's traumatic anyway. And I think I dealt with that trauma by finding what matters in life, in culture, in art, in music, and poetry. I realized that my emotional engine could be switched on in the pages of a good book, and in the notes of a beautiful song, and in the power of the still image and the power of the moving image. And those were my best friends, above and beyond human beings. Those were my bedfellows. They were my North Star, my safe harbor. And they allowed me to become stronger and not be so scared of the world. If anything, they made me realize that the world was at its best an extraordinary place to allow one's spirits to spend time. So I guess being that guy was always there, but then life gets a hold of you.
Yeah.
Life makes you say, well, you know, you come from this family, you're from this, whatever, this story, you want to aspire to to get the house and get the car and you know, whatever this society is constructed for what a man should be, I started falling into that, as do we all, right? And it took, you know, my wife. It always takes, I think, one person that sees you without all the weight that society's thrown onto you. And the woman that you know, I love is one of those people. She looked at me and she said, "I'm sick and tired of listening to you talk about Gordon Parks and Charlie Phillips and Bruce Davidson and Sally Mae, all these people. All you do is obsess over people that create." She looked me in the face and she said, "I know that when you pick up something and try and create it, it will be beautiful." I mean, she didn't know what would happen, but she knew it would be worth me trying. And I guess because I'm very dyslexic and I suffer from imposter syndrome, I never thought I deserved to be good at creating. And I was happy to be the fan of creators. And my wife pushed me into that abyss of possibility. And I picked up the camera.
Wow. That's awesome. Now, interesting you said that, because I was reading an interview that you had given, and you did mention imposter syndrome. And I find that to be something very common for people of color. And I was curious, how did the camera help you find yourself to get beyond that fear that you build up within your own body?
It's funny, if you look at a camera, and it could be in an iPhone or you know, some hugely expensive thing with it, you know, on a tripod, it looks like a lifeless piece of metal or aluminium. But I truly believe that they are magical time machines from another place. What the camera is able to conjure up for you as a human being and to whatever subject it's observing, to me, it doesn't feel like it's off this world. And, you know, my imposter syndrome, I mean, what is imposter syndrome? It is being raised or going through numerous situations that, you know, I call it death by 1,000 cuts, that beat you down to a point where your inner self is locked into a room that you don't have the key of. And if you're walking around like that, it's very easy to have anxiety when good things come your way. And that has always been a struggle for me. You know, I remember when I got the Vogue cover, and I know we'll talk about this later, but I immediately thought, when I got off the Zoom, just like I'm talking to you now, I just press end call, and I was at this desk, and I thought, oh my God, I cannot do it. And I do not deserve to be given this chance. Now, what I found about imposter syndrome, from my point of view, is that at the very depths of self-doubt lie the seeds of hope. So if you get right down to that place where truly you think you're not worth it, there will be a slither of hope that you can pull onto that will bring you into the light. And that's exactly what's happened to me throughout the whole of my life. So if anything, it can be a superpower, this construct that makes us feel we don't deserve.
Wow. And to piggyback off of that, you mentioned hope, and your work has always been described as hopeful. So talk to me about.
Before we even get there, let me tell you something you don't know.
Sure.
My late father, his name, so my name is Nisan Harriman. My late father, his name was Hope Harriman. And my middle name is Hope. Misan Hope Harriman. True story, on my passport.
Do you see this going like?
So I don't know.
Blown.
I've never said that in an interview before. So there you go.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, maybe we were being prepared by our celestial, you know, makers, whatever you believe in. Maybe that was just being sprinkled to saying you better bring some of that. I mean, you know, your father was called it, and it's in your collection of names as well. So awesome. Sorry.
No. But so you know what? I'm gonna switch questions then. So let me ask you this question. What was one of the first lessons that you learned, life lessons that you learned that you still pass on to others?
One of the first life lessons I learned is that you cannot defend yourself from art. You cannot. And I remember listening to Marvin Gaye when I was very young. I didn't fully understand, what he was singing about, but it reached into me. I mean, you've seen a million videos of babies being played music and they start shaking. It's something that is programmed in us, and we either feed it or it doesn't die, but it becomes dormant. I remember meeting, before I was married, going on a date with a lovely lady, and she says, "Oh, I don't really, I mean, I listen to music on the radio," and I just thought, it needs to be awakened. So from a young age, I knew that Homo sapiens, all of us, our superpower, the one thing that makes us completely unique from the rest of the natural world, is our ability to create art, magic. It is magic, If you listen to Nina Simone, Montreux Jazz Festival 1976, her performance of Feelings, which is my favorite live performance of all time. I've said this before, but she literally pulls out her soul, tears it into pieces, and throws it at the audience.
Oh wow, that sounds like a liner note from an album. It sounds that's so
but
poetic,
she gave too
man.
much. She gave too
Yes.
much,
Yes.
and so that was what I learned. That and I the young men and women that I mentor from all walks of life, I let them know that there's an answer and a question to everything that life throws at us within art and culture. It is so much more than something you should just do. It's so much more than going to a nightclub or let me just check out episode this of this podcast. In the inauguration, and congratulations to you, my brother, on Inauguration Day, there was as many singers, there were poets for a reason. It is a one thing that we can be proud of that we have as human beings. So that is what I learned.
Awesome. That speaks volumes, man. So now to go from there to talk about your eye and the question about hope is what I was saying earlier was that, your work has always been described as hopeful, like it's full of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me start thinking about, you're relatively, you just started like becoming a professional photographer, like literally 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you develop and more importantly, curate your eye?
Well, I think my eye started training itself, unbeknown to me, from the moment I drew breath. Because although the instrument that has allowed me to become a decent photographer only found me a few years ago, my eye has been observing for all of my natural life, and also, and I say this a lot to people that ask me about, oh, do you think I can be a photographer? I ask, why do you want to be a photographer? And there's a lot of the people I speak to will say, oh, I want to shoot fashion. I want to make money. I want to take great pictures. And I'm like, that's great, but you need to understand and respect the relevance of the camera and the picture to mankind. And that means that you need to read about the history of the still image. You need to read about the Photo League, the Jewish immigrants that came with nothing but a camera left to New York. And the only thing they had left to do was to shoot. You need to read about Moneta Slate Jr., who was the ebony photographer who shot those extraordinary images of Coretta Scott King and baby Bernice at the funeral of our Martin, and just understand the responsibility of wielding a camera. And that's always been me. And even if it's just fashion you want to do, not photojournalism, then read about Bill Cunningham, a man who's dedicated his whole life to observing the regular women of New York City, right? Not the models or actresses, just the women that were coming and going, and his love for how women could use clothes to at least, if society was beating them down, they could use fashion to say, hey, I'm here. So all of those things, before you even hold a camera, need to be digested by your inner soul. So read the books, watch the documentaries, of which many of them are free on YouTube. So that was what I did. And that's possibly why, although I picked up the camera not long ago, that I jumped from, novice to wherever I'm heading to at the moment.
I was reading about how you were technically like an influencer, and you were ingesting culture for a very long time and also giving out that cultural information to people. Like, you were the guy who knew everything about everything when it comes to the stuff. So I was really fascinated when I started, reading up on what we see and this idea of cultural nutrition. And I wanted to hear in your own words, explain cultural nutrition.
So, I was born into, some privilege. I have to say that, my family were comfortable and able to send me to have the best education money could buy. And through that process and through other, I guess my inquisitive mind, I ingested all of the best of music and film and art that anyone could possibly find. And I realized what that did for me. It helped me understand who I am. For me, the idea of somebody that's never had Joni Mitchell or Neil Young in their lives and have those singer-songwriters that can pluck into your soul is heartbreaking. So I wanted to give the sensory experience I had to everyone, because one must have optionality in what they put into their mind. Otherwise, we talk about eating your fruit and vegetables, your 5 a day. Well, we're your digital 5 a day, because the algorithms that are pushing all sorts of awful things on the social media pages are hurting the mental health of all of us, children and adults together. So I wanted to build this safe place where you could always jump on the website, on the Instagram or the Facebook, and you would always see something that was good for your soul. It may be hard to listen to or watch sometimes. It isn't just fun stuff that we celebrate, but it will be good for you to see and hear it. The other example I'll give is, think of any pop star, that is out there today, whether it's, let's say Taylor Swift. I have no issue with Taylor's music at all, but if that's the only thing that you listen to, you may not have complete knowledge of what music can be in all its spectrums, right? So, you should listen to some Puccini, you should listen to Maria Callas, you should listen to, Cat Stevens, you should listen to Intro, you should listen to Shy, you should listen to, Johnny Gill. All of that soup of excellence should be part of your life. And the final thing I'll say is, it isn't just the song, it is the sounds within the music as well. I was talking to someone saying Erykah Badu's Other Side of the Game is a great song, but for me, that song has one of the best bass lines of all time. So I listen to Other Side of the Game not to hear Erykah's voice. It's just that bass line. And if you haven't listened to that in a while, my brother, when you finish this interview, just listen out for that bass line.
I am. There was something that I was going to talk to you about, because so on your Instagram page, you have a link to your Spotify Christmas list. I was offended there was no Donny Hathaway this Christmas.
The thing about my relationship with Donny is, so if I could pick 2 people that I had to listen to for the rest of my life, 2 instruments of song, a man and a woman, I would pick Donny as a man. So I actually laughed that you brought him up. And then I would pick Sarah Vaughan as a woman, because when all said and done, I've never seen, two human beings do what both of those did as instruments. So I almost, because Christmas isn't, I almost revere Donny too much to put him in a Christmas playlist. If you understand what I'm saying, that's like beyond him to me.
I love it. It's like, you can't have this gift. That was all mine.
Yeah, that's a different playlist, man. I can't put him next to some of those people on, with respect to, some of the other people in there. That's Donny. So that's my answer.
I'll take it because I agree with you. I love Sarah Vaughan, but I love me some Ella Fitzgerald.
The video of Tiska the Tasker, one of the first videos, if not the first video she ever did, she was very young then. And she had to be at the back of the bus even in the video, which is interesting. But I remember watching it and thinking of the trauma all of our greats of that era had to go through. Billy, Ella particularly, and then a little bit later on, I'm also obsessed with Nina Simone, the absolute horror of trauma in many manifestations that she had to go through. And, all of them have left us with their music. And, I almost, in many ways, wish that we had a little bit less of that music, because I know where it came from,
Yeah.
And they had a little bit more of a little bit more light in their lives. It's heartbreaking when you think of it that way, but I also celebrate them because I think so much that was taken away from them, they have given to us, so we can climb in a way that they never had the opportunity to.
It's interesting that you say that, because it makes me think, dovetail into some of your work, right? Specifically about the Black Lives Matter. When you were in that moment, and we've seen these amazing shots of yours, and there's a part of a photographer where you're in the moment and invisible, and then you're very present in the space and capturing it, how, take me back to that day for you, and what was it like for you to be in that space, to do what you did and connect with the people in order to get those shots?
I have been lucky to shoot all sorts of, very famous, very powerful people. And I thought I was always comfortable around the camera and understood what could happen around the camera up until the lynching of George Floyd. And, I just sat there, and again, I looked at my wife and I said, I don't know what to do. I do not know what to do. I feel helpless. I'm tired. The weight is too much. And she said, look to your camera. Look to your camera. And I looked at this thing and I was like, yeah, she was right. So I picked up the camera the next morning and started sort of walking around the house with it, just holding it and thinking. And then a few days later, the protests, just a wave of protests globally, started. And I went out and I didn't know if there'll be 50 people in London, because obviously it's not the United States, and I turned up at Hyde Park on the first one that I went to. And initially there were like a few people with, making sure we were socially distanced and, just regular stuff. And then I started snapping. It was fun, just like I normally do. An hour later, there were 3,000 people there, of which 80% of them look like me. And I realized that I am going to be facing my own trauma for the first time with my camera. So just let that sink in. I was looking at people that had my lived experience, that had to deal with all the same shit we've all had to deal with. And I was asking them permission to suffer with me just that bit, just a little bit more, because they knew that we had work to do. So when they saw me, first of all, a black man with a camera, and the eyes matched, never spoke. I never walked up to anyone and said, "Can I take a picture?" But they would look at each other, and they would give me more than maybe another cameraman that didn't have that same lived experience. That is possibly why some of my images do invoke a lot of emotion in people, because it went way beyond my talent, way beyond my camera. It went to a place where two souls saw each other and knew they had work to do. And that's what I hope, in some small way, I captured in my imagery.
Yeah, I was thinking about this before we started talking, and then I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that when there's two brothers in the room full of a bunch of white people, and you just connect with them. You don't have to say a word. You just connect, and you just keep it moving.
Unspoken, but understood.
Absolutely. So this one is a little different. It's not uncommon, especially in this era where people are starting to come to terms with the racist cultural environment that we all live in. But I was curious, as a photographer, you're especially with the subject matter of of Black Lives Matter, and even with the September issue, the conversation around race is a constant now. Yeah. And I'm curious, when someone says all lives matter, don't all lives matter, how do you respond to that? Or do you even care? Like, no, I'm not even going to approach that.
Well, you have to look at where that comes from. And it can be, there are two really important things for me to how I navigate the ridiculous rhetoric of all lives matter. I look at it from a bird's eye view, and I realize that empathy is the mother of hope, right? And if you don't have empathy in your heart, and frankly at this point it doesn't matter why you don't have it, if you don't, let's just say if you don't, then it is impossible for you to walk a mile in anyone else's feet. Now, if you don't have empathy and you are white and have enjoyed all the privileges of just being in a society where it is not constructed to make sure you fail, both as a person to develop oneself and as a professional, then of course you can easily become the all lives matter man or woman. A great example I give to my white friends is taking a taxi in London, right? And I hang out in some pretty nice places in London. My record of being driven past is 13 times in a day. So I mean, I'm in a nice suit in the middle of Mayfair, and I will put my hand out, and sometimes they'll even slow down to make me think they're going to pick me up, and they'll just take a peek out, and they'll just some of them don't even, they go real slow, so they know I know that they don't want me inside their sacred vehicle. And every white person that I've spoken to has never experienced that. Now, most of the people that I tell this are horrified, and they're beginning to understand the privilege that they have. Some who won't tell me to my face may have another view, and those are the all lives matter people. But I would say that they are in the minority. That minority is, thank God for today, the inauguration day, is less empowered, right? And they will either have to have a reflection point and educate themselves on why Black Lives Matter has to be a conversation that isn't a debate, or they'll be at the back of the class and no one will listen to them. And we will get on building a new future that is inclusive, people from all walks of life that believe that racism is a bigger stain on the human condition. If you do not believe that, then you're going to be left behind. That train, it's moving, and you either get on it or you're going to be in a wasteland. So I look at them, I'm like, well, if that's their view, they're already in the past. There's a picture that I took saying you fucked with the last generation. And I believe it. I believe it because this generation, all right, have the internet, and they are not afraid to my father's generation, they had to deal with the humiliation of the social construct that is racism. They had to deal with that humiliation without knowing that they had a collective of people, both black and white, that were horrified by it. Now, with the BLM movement that has happened globally, there are Chinese people, Indian people, black people, white people that are saying, nah, this ain't happening. And I think this is the last generation that is going to have to deal with it in the way that we're seeing in my pictures. Because now there's a brother and sisterhood that is of hundreds of millions of people globally that won't take any of this rubbish anymore. So, we'll see what fate throws at us, but we are much more prepared to force change than ever before.
So now let's get to British Vogue. Tell us how this came about.
To be clear, I had never shot for any magazine, let alone Vogue, in my life. I had done a few very cool projects. People liked my black and white photojournalistic style of shooting. But it was off the back of my protest pictures just going crazy on the internet. So even though I was in London, America seemed to really lose their minds over my images. And maybe, again, it invoked a truth that was very much an American truth, even though I shot it in London. And, Martin Luther King's son used one of my images to make a big statement on the whole issue. And a whole bunch of, Puff Daddy, 50 Cent, loads of other people, Sarah Jessica Parker, the mayor of London, Lewis Hamilton. And all of these people were, they're not like people I have on my phone. They saw something in those images and then it took flight. Edward Enninful posted a few of those images himself. And obviously, being the genius he is, he took it upon himself to see what no one else could see. And, he is on record saying that this is a voice British Vogue was missing. And he must have taken, an extraordinarily brave call to commission a pretty much within high fashion circles unknown photographer who happened to be black, right? To shoot the most important cover, arguably, in the history of British Vogue, because of what was happening historically at the time, and everything that was going on in London and the US and the world. It was, the activism issue. This was an issue to celebrate, our brothers and sisters that are swimming upstream most of the time to fight for the lives of people that look like me. And I call it the symphony of activism because, everyone from Bernice, there's some amazing people in that issue. And to have the responsibility to shoot so many of them was remarkable. So we had the Zoom call where Edward let me know, and I, imposter syndrome, anxiety, panic attacks. I kept it cool. I didn't faint in the call, but when the call ended, I was just like a mess, But the thing about, the Black experience is that when you're given the responsibility like that, you have a shower, you get your clothes on, and you've got work to do. And I knew that he's given me this shot, but he's also entrusting me with the responsibility of telling the stories of really important people in the annals of what's going to be remembered and seen by our children. And I felt that it was much more than a magazine. I felt it was kind of wearing my battle armor and going to fight for an honest version of events to be seen when I'm long gone. And that's what I felt like I had to do. It's all very poetic and dramatic with me. I forgot to warn you, but basically that's how I felt about getting that Vogue cover.
Awesome. So, and about the issue, there is something that, as I started to go through it, there's this burden of truth that as a Black person, you have to tell the Black story. So I wanted to know, as you were set upon shooting your subjects, what was that conversation like? How did you create the moment so you would know exactly how to create those instances?
Edward said to me, Misan, I trust you, and just do what you do. And that's the other thing about power and influence, is that, as the editor-in-chief and arguably the most powerful man of any color in the fashion industry, you can wield power in many ways. He empowers, he empowered me to believe in myself. So I went into all of the shoots knowing that it was okay to shoot it the way that I felt was right. And I'm a very emotional shooter anyway. So most of the people that I met were like, it's you. You're the guy that turns up without, any big lighting and all sorts of things. And it's you with the camera. And we spend half the time talking, And it's really important. I can have a shoot that could be 2 hours long in terms of the timing I have. And I only actually take photographs for half an hour, because the first part of taking a photograph is to connect with the other human being who you're sharing that moment with. So that's what I really did. We did, had a lot of talking, and at the end, I would wield the camera. But a whole photo has many parts, and the final bit is pressing the shutter. That's another little lesson that I've learned in my journey with the still image. So it was lots of listening. I did a lot of listening to the subjects. All of them have a lot to say, and I have a lot to learn. And I did a lot of listening, and then with their grace, they allowed me to capture their truth. So that is what you see in that magazine.
That is awesome, and job well done, by the way. I was
Thank
just
you,
just enamored with everything. Because of social media, beyond the internet, social media allows us to live in very insulated spaces. And so the question is, when you have moments where you can capture something very important to me and to you, like the Black experience, how do you ensure that it can really get out, or do you even think about that? Do you think
well,
it
now
just
I
happens
do
organically?
Initially I didn't. I just went out because I felt my soul needed to do something, and it went to the marches and the protests. But now, because of the platform that I've given, it is way more important than any image that I take, that I make sure I give a voice to the voiceless. So I was a little emotional earlier today because one of my personal projects just went live, actually. And I'll if you go on my bio on Instagram, if you just Google it, you'll see. But I've been shooting 10 women, Black women, that are all survivors of domestic abuse. And these women have never in a million years been anywhere near a Vogue magazine, and I wanted to let all of them know that society is lucky to have them with us, that their light is a different color to so many of the other spectrums of light that I see. And I was able to work with Vogue, British Vogue, and have them put these women front and center in an article that millions and millions of people will see, celebrating their strength, their humility, and their beauty, in a way that I think could possibly be life-changing for them. And they deserve this and so much more. So that's what I do, with the platform that I have. This, to me, there's no cover, there's no amount of money for any fancy brands that will pay me to do shoots that is anywhere near as important as being able to have this platform to lift others up. So I understand what you're saying about the internet, but the internet is what you make of it. And if people like me are out there forcing the issue and still having a large reach with both my own media business, my own platform as an individual, and my relationship with incredible human beings like the editor of British Vogue, I think the combination of all of those things wouldn't be able to do much if it wasn't for the information superhighway. So yes, you can watch rampant racism and misogyny and just awful things on the internet, but on the other side, you can see what I'm doing, or you can listen to spoken word and just curate an experience. I think that's the word. We're getting to the age. Before, it was the age of viral, it was the age of clickbait, it was it was the age of anything to get attention. And now we have attention fatigue from it. So people are genuinely looking for curators that can help them navigate the noise of the internet. And I certainly have put my hand up to say I will happily lead that charge. So that's how I'm going to break through bubbles of lack of education, break through bubbles of nepotism, break through bubbles of race and misunderstanding due to cultural differences with my work. If you look at some of my pictures, I don't care who you are, they will talk to you in the language that you understand, so you can learn a little bit more about the human condition.
Give me 5 things that everybody should have in their repertoire.
Okay, I think the live version by Bill Withers, rest in peace, sir, of Hope She'll Be Happier. And Hope She'll Be Happier is a song, a very rare song, because it's a man who loves this woman so much that he's happy that she's looking for love elsewhere, even though it's just the pathos of it is extraordinary. The next one I would say would be the scene in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when Will Smith's father disappoints him. And I would say it's one of the top 5 greatest television scenes of all time. And I've never held it together. I've seen it over 1,000 times every time I watch it, because every part of it, every time I watch it, I learn something new. So obviously Uncle Phil, and James Avery, rest in peace again, he was everyone's father, so if those are my friends that have had really ropey relationships, we actually talk about it, and saying, you know what, as we're older, that character was much more. We didn't realize then that was much more than just a funny guy on TV. He was there for us. And there's a bit in it where Will Smith, his dad says bye, and he goes, bye Lou. He doesn't say bye dad. And that was like the final kind of, I'm letting go. And when he falls into, at the end of the scene, and he falls into Uncle Phil's arms saying, why doesn't he want me? The camera pans down to a statue of a man holding a boy. Woo! I'm going to give you a podcast because I think everyone loves podcasts. And 1619, I would say the New York Times 1619 project. And I know there's been a lot of controversy, but I don't care. It's remarkable. Please, to anyone listening, if you haven't done it, it won a Pulitzer last year for good reason. It is remarkable work, the 1619 project. I would recommend a book called Natives by Akala, who is a genius British poet and activists, and it basically tells the history lesson they never gave us at school. So it covers both the colonial relationship with Africa and the transatlantic slave trade in a way that I've never seen before. One more. I would ask you to revisit a film directed by Denzel Washington called Antoine Fisher. Because as I've gotten older, that film, I always liked it, but as I've gotten older, I've realized how important that film is. And there are many scenes in it that have helped me become a better man, hopefully become a better father, and also have more empathy for people that are dealing with abuse and trauma. And Derek Luke is just incredible in it. Mm-hmm. And there's an amazing scene where he sees his mother, who's played by a then not unknown, but not who she is now, Viola Davis, and she doesn't say a word for 90% of that scene. And I remember watching her then saying, I'm not sure I know this lady too well, but she's gonna win an Oscar at least. I am into art and culture, and they a lot of people come to me for the very thing you asked me. It is my great pleasure to share all that has moved me with as many people as possible. So thank you for asking, and I'll shut up.
No, this has been great. It's
I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more.
No, please,
I'll give you one more. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people remember Wesley Snipes as Blade, and action and everything else, but he is as seasoned and brilliant a character actor as anyone you can find. Just looking at Jungle Fever and his performances, he can really act. Mm-hmm. But there's a scene that again, as I get older, just reminds me to not judge people by the obvious, and always try and have empathy for those that you meet, because you don't know what devils they have. And it's in Waiting to Exhale, where he meets Angela Bassett at the bar, and they have this incredible moment where the whole world seems to fade away, and she's dealing with her shit, mm-hmm. and he's dealing with his wife, and he talks about his wife and a lot, and she's suffering with cancer, and then he lets her know that she's white, and then they have this amazing, completely platonic, but almost more intimate than sex itself, where both their souls in that very moment really needed to merge. Mm-hmm. And it's a stunning, I love Waiting to Exhale, amazing soundtrack. I love it. It's like a fine wine as I get older.
Misan, thank you so much for what you do and what you bring to the culture, and for taking the time to talk to me about your work and what you've honestly left the impression of who we are and how people see us to the world.
Thank you, sir.
That was photographer Nisan Harriman talking about his work and his passions. Now, be sure to check out his website, What We See. Now, that's with 3 E's, by the way, for more cultural nutrition. And follow Nisan Harriman and What We See on Instagram for a daily dose of art and inspiration. And that's our show. Thanks again to Nisan Harriman for participating in this interview. Now, AFCA members curated their own list of the best movies, television shows, and performances of 2020. And you can check out our top picks by visiting the AFCA channel on YouTube. And be sure to like and subscribe while you're there. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for news, upcoming events, and programming. So until next time, keep your head up.